just want to say thank you to everybody here for joining us for Women's Cycling Week. As you know, or as most of you know, yearly we have had Women's Ride Day. However, with COVID-19, we haven't been able to offer the opportunity for women to test out and try other cycling clubs, to be able to have the opportunity to ride with and try out various clubs or activities such as riding at the velodrome. So it's unfortunate that we can't physically be close to each other, but we wanted to at least socially offer up an entire week of opportunities, panel discussions, webinars, informational videos, even a Zwift ride on the weekend. So I'd just like to thank everybody who has taken the time to join us today. As a note, we are recording this session and we're hoping to be able to post this on our YouTube channel. This talk today on Wednesday is about how to be comfortable on your bike. Tomorrow, we are hosting a conversation about diversity and inclusion within the sport of cycling. On Friday, you're going to see a couple of YouTube videos regarding basic bike maintenance, how to change a flat, and just generally outlining the parts of a bicycle so you can gain that confidence to perhaps go riding on your own or with a group of riders. Saturday, we have a Zwift meetup. And if you want more information on that, be sure to sign up on our webpage and you'll get all the information on Friday on how to sign up to that. And finally on Sunday, we're just kind of having a Zoom social where you can grab a drink, grab some food, sit on your patio or your dining room and just join us for some chats. Both of the Saturday and Sunday sessions are hosted by the Toronto Hustle women's team. And this entire week obviously is brought to you by the Ontario Cycling Association. So once again, thank you. Today, once again, is about how to be comfortable on your bicycle. And I'd like to introduce Molly Hurford. She is very passionate about women's comfort. And this issue is actually sometimes something that people don't really talk about. And just before I hand things over to her, I'm just going to tell you guys a quick story about myself growing up. I started cycling when I was 11 years old, and I was on a cycling team based out of Scarborough, where it was predominantly master, and I mean like older master men from Trinidad and Guyana. And I was definitely the youngest by far on my club. And I was having issues. I'm hurting. It's sore. My bike doesn't fit right. I'm not sitting right. And they'd be like, we don't talk about this. We don't talk about this. Here's a saddle that's 3 inches thick with women's padding. You should be good. And I'm like, okay, I guess so. And it wasn't until I was 20, all right, when I got a proper bike fit and I learned about a proper saddle, and I finally was educated that cycling is not supposed to be uncomfortable. It is not normal to have pinches and pains in certain areas of your body. And ever since then, I have been enjoying a pain-free cycling life. And my hope is that through this video, through people like Molly, we can gain a knowledge and education about the comfort of cycling. And all this content that you learned today, please share with others, because it's something both Molly and I are very passionate about, and discomfort is not what should be preventing you from riding a bicycle. So after that introduction, I'm going to hand it over to Molly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chantal, and a huge thanks to the OCA for putting this on. As Chantal kind of alluded to, women's cycling stuff is sort of my passion. It's just what I absolutely love talking about, writing about. I'm an endurance sports journalist. I write a lot of books about bikes. I'm a cycling coach. I'm a yoga instructor. And one of the first books that I actually wrote was this book called Saddle Sore: Ride Comfortable, Ride Happy. And the reason I wrote it a few years ago now is I would be at races and people knew me as a woman who wrote about cycling stuff. So they assumed that I knew a lot about cycling, which was only kind of true. And I would be at races and I would have women come up to me and ask me questions like, hey, like I've been numb in my nether regions for this entire race. Do you have any recommendations on how to like not have that happen? Or in a few really memorable occasions, I had women like literally just drop their shorts and be like, do you know what's going on with this? And I'd be like, no, please see a doctor. I have no idea. And I started realizing that no one was really talking about this. And like, I mean, I won't ask for a show of hands because we're not all on video, but you know, when you think about who got you into cycling or how you got into cycling, for most women, it's going to be a guy who got you into cycling, whether it's your dad or your partner or boyfriend or husband or who, or even just you found a local team and it was mostly men. And while that's amazing, like my dad is, you know, one of the people who got me into cycling, and I was on an all male team and they were fantastic. They were just such wonderful humans that, you know, took me in and taught me everything about bikes. They did not know what to tell me about, you know, if I should use a pad with my bike shorts or if I should use a tampon or what the heck chamois cream was, or honestly what a chamois was. I started as a triathlete. So for the first 2 years of my riding, and bear in mind, like I started as like, oh, like I'm going to do an Ironman kind of triathlete. So I was riding 50 miles. I legitimately wore a bathing suit for the first 2 years of my riding because that's what I saw triathletes wear. So that is what I trained in. That or those old Sophie gym shorts that you like roll up at the waist. That was my life. So I've learned a lot since then. And yeah, the point of tonight is kind of talking about riding comfortable on the bike. At the end, I'll open it up to questions. I'm going to share my screen, so I'm not going to be able to see the chat, just so everyone's aware. So if you think of questions, please drop them into the chat. Feel free, and I'll hit them at the end of my sort of speech about bike comfort. All right, so let me get this screen shared here. Where is it? Sorry guys, hang on. There we go. Okay. So this is the guide to happy, comfortable riding. The first thing I always talk about is the fact that we're women. We are not men and we are not Barbies. This is very obvious, but this is also a very important note because I feel like a lot of the time the guys in our life tend to assume that what works for them is going to work for us, or as Chantal pointed out, they're going to do that thing where they end up being like, oh yeah, here's a women's saddle that has like 8 inches of gel on it. And that might not be the best saddle for you. So we're not men. We're also not Barbies. And by that, I mean, if anyone remembers playing with Barbies as a kid, if you take their pants off, they have no like nether regions, right? They just have smooth plastic. As one woman told me or pointed out when I was working on Saddle Star, the book, women have folds. So guys have this very obvious thing that, you know, takes up space on the saddle. Women, on the other hand, don't. Our nether regions are directly on the saddle. And frankly, I think that's a lot more painful sometimes, right? Like we can't move our stuff out of the way like guys can. So I will start by saying, it's actually, I'm gonna argue, much harder to be a female cyclist than it is to be a male cyclist. So that said, before we head south, I wanted to talk a little bit about a couple things that I've noticed with women, and I've noticed more so now that I'm doing a lot more coaching with camps and that I'm teaching yoga. So before we head to the nether regions portion of the talk, I want to talk about this other part of comfort on the bike. And that's sort of this chest and gut region. So what I've observed from a lot of women is we tend to wear sports bras really tight with a heart rate strap under them sometimes, and then a jersey that's probably, you know, if you're trying to go for like a racer fit, we're like zipping ourselves into these like pretty tight jerseys. And by the time we have so heart rate strap, sports bra, base layer, tight jersey, maybe even like a vest over that, and we have a bunch of stuff in our jersey pockets, I've noticed we get so crammed and compressed in our chest and our stomach that it's really hard to breathe. I was coaching a camp this winter, and there were a few times we'd be climbing up a hill and a couple of the girls kept dropping back. And finally I, you know, circled back and I started talking to them, and they're telling me about how hard of a time they're having breathing. And I started thinking about it, and I started looking, I was like, wait, you're wearing, this really compressive sports bra, you're wearing a heart rate strap under it. And I was like, could you just like unzip your jersey a little bit? And as soon as they unzipped their jersey a bit to give themselves a little bit more air, suddenly they weren't having problems on the hills anymore. And I think especially as women, we've been conditioned to not take deep breaths, to be, where we think we need to be like sucked in and compressed all of the time. And especially when we're on the bike, when you're leaned over like this, it's not a flattering angle. Like, let's just be real here. If you're breathing properly, if you look at what pro racers are doing, if you watch a pro woman race and you look at her from the side view, her stomach is going to be so expanded. She's going to be breathing really hard. And that's how you actually like are able to power your ride, right? So what I want everyone to do very quickly here, indulge me, is I want you to just put a hand on your stomach. And I want us to just take a couple of deep breaths. And we don't need to do in through the mouth, out through the mouth, whatever. In through the nose, out through the nose, totally fine. I just want you to think about trying really hard to like press your hand out and really expand your belly, and then let all the air out. If we can do that on the bike, we're going to climb a lot better. We're going to be a lot more comfortable, and we're not going to be doing that constant like pant that we tend to do. So to me, it's really important that we work on being able to do that. So yeah, let's all try just 2 big breaths, expanding our bellies, and then letting it all out. And I want you to remember that on the bike. And I also want you to remember that it's totally okay if the size of your sports bra isn't a size 4 and you go up to a size 6 for a slightly looser fit. It's okay if you're wearing a large or an extra large jersey. I'm a pretty short, small human, and sometimes I'll wear the large jersey because I would rather have the ability to breathe than feel like it's just like shoot me in. So that is my word on comfort in our jersey area. And I'm sorry, I'm just gonna have to like escape this for 2 seconds and just let some people in who are in the waiting room here. So apologies for my getting off of this. If you're just joining us, thank you so much for joining. All right, I will get back to this. Okay, so we've talked about our breathing issues. Now let's talk about my favorite part, saddles. This is probably my favorite image that I've ever found in my entire life. Saddle choice is such a personal thing. I desperately wish I had an answer when it came to like what saddle is going to be best for me. It's a question I find myself fielding a lot of the time. And unfortunately, there is no perfect answer. If there was, there would only be one kind of saddle that gets made. Unfortunately, as I said before, women have folds. We are all different configurations of our nether regions. We all have, different amounts of padding. We have different hip width. We have different, honestly, even just like inner thighs. All of those things are going to make a difference when it comes to picking what saddle is going to work best for us. And unfortunately, to complicate matters even more, the saddle that works for you on the mountain bike might not work on the cyclocross bike, and it might not work on the road bike, and the road bike saddle might not work on your time trial bike. It's kind of a minefield. So the few things I can say about saddles is, first of all, if you've ever been to a bike shop that's tried to sell you on a gel seat pad, and you're not just like cruising on your like sweet beach cruiser for a couple miles, bad news. The problem with the gel seats, they were really popular for a while. I remember when I was a kid, my mom had one that I swear you could press your fingers into and they'd be completely covered. The problem with the gel seat though is, if you think about how you pedal, your sit bones, so my hands here, your sit bones are both seated on the saddle. And as you pedal, you're going to be tilting and tilting. And what's going to give you more power in your pedal stroke is going to be, as you tilt, the point where you press into something firm. So where you stop. That's going to be the hard bit. So the problem with our gel saddle is that as we pedal, our hip bones, or our sit bones, are pressing, trying to find that hard spot to get purchase, to get power, to go harder, to pedal more efficiently. So instead of a gel seat actually being more comfortable, it's actually not as comfortable because you're just going to be pressing. So gel saddles, not fantastic. A little tiny bit of cushion, totally fine. But when you can really stick your fingers in and they go down, that's too much. The other thing you want to do when you're looking for a saddle is you want to get your sit bones measured. And the reason for this is because it does not matter how many pounds you are or how, pear-shaped your hips are or what size jeans you wear. I always give the example of my dad is a 300-pound, 6-foot man. I am not. And he and I have the exact same width of sit bones. So most bike shops can actually check this. They have what I lovingly refer to as the assometer. It's basically like a soft gel pad that you sit down on and you go like this, you wiggle on it and you get up and there's a little imprint of where your sit bones are. And then they measure the distance. And that helps to decide how wide the back of your saddle is going to be. So that's one of the few parts of the saddle that's measurable, and you can kind of have like, okay, at least this cuts half the saddles out of my options. Then you have to decide between cutouts and how long you want your saddle to be, all of that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, the best way to do that is just going to be some trial and error. So the only thing I can really say to that is a lot of bike shops will let you try saddles for a couple of rides, or will be able to, point you in the direction of a team or local bike club or something that can kind of be like, oh yeah, I have this saddle I can lend you. So that's one way to do it. Yeah, it's really tricky though, because what works for your best friend might not work for you. A cutout might feel awesome for someone, and for you, it's just pinching the entire ride. So it's really just going to be a whole lot of trial and error with that. The other thing I will add though is if you do find a saddle that's comfortable, please just buy 6 of them, because they will not make that same saddle again next year. I've even gone to the lengths of getting a saddle recovered in the past because I desperately wanted to keep it because it was the only comfortable one I'd ever found at that point. But it turns out actually even the rails on the saddle and the plastic bits start to wear out after a while. So it's not just the leather that's compromised. You do have to change out saddles every once in a while. And the saddle that comes on your bike, and this is the thing I've noticed with a lot of women, the saddle that your bike comes with is probably not the right saddle for you. Like, it might fit okay, it might work okay, but it's probably not the best saddle for you. So please don't feel like you're stuck with the saddle that came on your bike. There are so many other ones to choose from. And I think that's just such a big thing, because most bike brands are going to cheap out on the saddle. Like, you're not getting a really great saddle on your bike unless you're buying like a $15,000 bike. You're probably getting kind of one of the lower line ones, and it's not measured to fit you. It's not taking into account that you've had 3 kids and your hips have spread, or you happen to have a very sensitive labia. Sorry, it happens. They're not thinking about that. They're just thinking, what's the cheapest saddle I can put on this bike that's going to work okay for most people? So please just experiment with saddles. If your saddle is uncomfortable, try a different one. Okay, I really just like having this slide in here, even though it's kind of silly to have it in there, but chamois. So like I said in the beginning, when I first got into riding bikes, I did not know that chamois were a thing. In fact, I remember when I got my first pair of bib shorts, the guys on my bike team handed them to me, and I was just like, what the heck are these? Like, why are you giving me this diaper? And then I put it on, and I was like, oh, that's why you're giving me this diaper. This is much better. Yeah, this is way more comfortable. And I never looked back. And I was very lucky because they gave me bib shorts, not regular shorts. Again, I can't do a show of hands, but if you haven't tried bib shorts already, I cannot recommend bib shorts enough. It kind of comes back to what I said before about the ability to breathe. A lot of women's bike shorts are going to cut right into your stomach, and then you're going to be folded over your stomach. So we're taking an already kind of uncomfortable posture and we're making it even more awkward. Bib shorts don't do that. They have suspenders, not elastic in the waist. So if you haven't tried bib shorts yet, highly recommend. And a lot of women's ones now, because the other common question is, well, how do I pee in bib shorts? Great question. Most women's bib shorts now actually have some kind of like emergency hatch. They either have like a strap in front that you can pull up and over your head, or they're really stretchy in the back so you can actually pull them down. Some have zippers. There's a ton of different options out there. I highly, highly recommend bib shorts. If you haven't tried, really, really worth it. If you haven't tried a chamois at all, you really want one. Chamois actually used to be, and this is like a really odd thing, chamois back in the 80s were actually made with leather. So you'd have these wool, scratchy bike shorts with deer skin cut out and in the crotch of the bike shorts. I once did an article where I wore a pair of them for a week. Do not recommend it. But the point is, everyone always thinks that the bigger pad in a chamois, like the thicker the pad, the more comfortable it's going to be. But that's actually not really what a chamois is for. The chamois is not so much for the padding as it is for the fact that it's going to fight friction. It's really designed so that your lady parts, or nether regions, or whatever you want to call them, the undercarriage, if you will, so that your undercarriage is not just directly rubbing on the saddle in a really awkward way your entire ride. So when you see like the super squishy pair of shorts, remember it's going to have the exact same issue as the super squishy gel seat. You're going to be doing that really weird, like, ouch, 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 with your sit bones pressing down with every pedal stroke. So you want a chamois that has a bit of padding, but isn't super thick. The other thing, weirdly enough, female-specific chamois, and I'm not kidding you, do this next time you're in a bike shop. I should have pulled a pair out to show you guys. But if you flip a pair of bib shorts inside out, the women's chamois will actually sort of look like male genitalia. That's because it is designed to have a spot for your sit bones and then a smooth channel for your undercarriage. So look for that. That's usually a great sign of a really good chamois. So once we found them, the thing that I always say, and there's always going to be someone who's going to say, oh, well, I wear underwear with my bike shorts and I've never had a problem. You are one of the few people, if that is the case. We don't wear underwear with our bike shorts. There's a couple of reasons for this. Number one, the bike shorts, like I said, are there to fight friction between you and the saddle. When we add underwear, we're actually adding more friction because now we have this fabric that's scraping against your skin every time you pedal. So you're going to end up with these little tiny micro tears in your skin over the course of a long ride. And the problem with the tiny micro tears, in addition to being just plain old uncomfortable, is it gives you all this space for friendly bacteria or not so friendly bacteria to make its way in. And that's how we end up with saddle sores. And I'll get to saddle sores in a moment here, but I'll tell you this much. I was lucky enough to get to see a petri dish of like a scraping post-ride and watch how it like changed over time. And let me tell you, the underwear versus the chamois, the underwear one actually had like a little bit of blood in it from scraping. So really don't want that. No underwear. It's not just about panty lines. It is about actual comfort. The chamois is designed to be antimicrobial. It's designed to trap bacteria in it. It's designed to be comfortable. It's designed to be against skin. You wouldn't wear underwear with a bathing suit unless you were trying it on in a store. So don't wear underwear with your bike shorts. Okay. The more advanced thing, if you've been riding for a while and you've been trying to do long rides, there's always this big question of chamois cream. The when, the how, and the why. So the when. You should not need chamois cream for every single ride. If you find yourself needing this friction-fighting lubricant for every single ride, you probably need different shorts or a different saddle because you should be able to go at least 90 minutes without having any major issues and needing that friction fighting. It's just a really good sign that something is not working in your setup. So if you are riding long, chamois cream is fantastic. It really helps kind of keep everything nice and smooth and a little more comfortable. The how we apply it, the how much, quarter size. So some of you might actually recall being on a ride with someone who's wearing so much chamois cream that it's actually coming out the sides of their chamois. It's hilarious. It's also disgusting. I heard one man once refer to it as a slip and slide situation. You do not want to be sliding off of your saddle because you use too much chamois cream. Quarter amount, that's all it takes. And the other question about how is, how do I actually put it on? A lot of people will put it right on their bike shorts and then pull their shorts up. I'm sitting, so I can't do my little dance that I normally do, but I find that to not work very well, because then you're trying to like jiggle your shorts up. You probably end up with most of your chamois cream on like the side of your knee or something. So I'm actually a much bigger proponent of putting it on the direct spots that have the friction. You know, that could be like where your butt meets your thigh. It could be your inner thigh. You know, it might be actually directly on a certain part of your nether regions. Just whatever part tends to get the most chafing or the most friction during your ride, that's where you want it to go. You don't want to just kind of slap it all on your shorts and pull them up and hope for the best. It's much more efficient and much more financially useful to just use a little bit at a time and use it where you actually need it. Pad or tampon? This is another question that I just had no idea about. And I'm not gonna lie, I used a pad for far longer than I should have. The problem with the pad though is it's the exact same issue as the underwear with the shorts, right? Like you're just kind of adding another thing to create friction and to, you know, just trap bacteria and press that bacteria right up against the spot where you don't want a bunch of bad bacteria. So use a tampon. And this conversation is getting really real really fast here. I have heard of a problem referred to as rope burn, where you don't properly move the tampon string out of the way. So you end up with a bit of chafing caused by your tampon strings. Just make sure you get that up and out of the way somewhere. I hope everyone else is blushing, because I think I am. It's much weirder. I'm not going to lie. Normally I have this conversation in bike shops at women's nights all the time, but it's much stranger to do it talking just directly to my computer. Okay, next awkward question. Shaving, waxing, trimming, keeping it au naturel. This is totally a personal choice here. And I talked to a lot of gynecologists to get the answer on which one of these things was going to be best. And honestly, none of them really had a great singular response. The big response was to keep everything clean. So if you don't opt to shave or wax or trim, just make sure everything is clean. And, you know, you're just going to want to be even more careful about making sure you're, you know, really taking time in the shower to get all the chamois cream and sweat and stuff just out of there to prevent any issues post-ride. If you do shave, what they did recommend was like at least keep it 24 hours before a ride. You don't really want to be shaving like 10 minutes before a ride. And, you know, any amount of razor burn is probably going to end up resulting in at least chafing, if not saddle sores. And waxing, same deal, probably even 48 hours before you ride, just to give everything a chance to heal. Otherwise, you run a huge risk of ingrown hairs and saddle sores and all of that fun stuff. But really keeping it clean was the major piece of advice there. Okay, pain, chafing, we'll get to saddle sores, we'll talk about numbness in a second. We can fight these things. Sort of coming back to what Chantal said right as we started, biking should not be uncomfortable. Like, okay, yes, 5 hours into a ride, sure, it's not going to feel fantastic. Of course, that hill is going to be uncomfortable, but we should never be in pain. I've done a couple of women's night talks where I actually was sitting there with a woman who was in tears afterwards and she said that she loved riding, but every time she rode, it just hurt so much that, you know, for like days after, she was still in pain. And like, I'll be honest, she also, like she said, you know, her relationship was affected by it. Her sex life was affected by it. Everything was being affected by this. And she just didn't know what to do. And she actually had stopped riding because of it. She showed up at this bike night to just kind of see if she could figure out like one thing that she could do. And I mean, I gave her a lot of things she could do. And, you know, a few months later, she actually emailed me and said she figured it out. She got a bike fit. She got different shorts. She changed her saddle. And she changed her ride style a bit. And it was amazing. It like let her actually ride comfortably. So, you know, you might not have something that dire, but if you find that after like an hour on your bike, your butt starts to go numb, or, you know, you're feeling a weird pinching, especially when you're really trying to go hard on a flat or something, like you can fix that. You know, it might take a little work, but you can fix that. You can ride really comfortably. And, you know, this is something that I'm hoping that everyone that's on here can also then take home, or, you know, take to the next ride with another new female rider, is this idea of like, it shouldn't be uncomfortable to ride. If you're in pain the whole time, we can fix that. So yeah,
Molly, just a quick
yes.
question.
Oh yeah.
Can you talk about the differences between, let's call it normal pains that you may feel when you haven't been on a bike in months or years
Yes.
during the first few rides versus like the more sharp pains?
Yes, great point. It is not going to feel super comfortable if you haven't been on the bike in a while. We've all been, you know, we've taken the winter off and gotten back on the saddle and been like, ooh, that feels a little spicy. We all know sort of in a workout, say you're doing intervals. I'll add another example for those who don't do intervals. In an interval, you sort of know that point that you can keep pushing, and you're going at like a threshold level, and you're like, okay, I can definitely hold this for 20 minutes. That's a good level of discomfort. You know, you can hold that, that's fine. But like, say you're going like maximum sprint, like 5-second effort, you know, you can't hold that for much longer without it being really dangerous and really bad for you. Like your body would start shutting down. The same is true of your soft tissue. There's only so much you can do to it. And, you know, if it starts feeling to the point where you get off the bike and it still hurts, that you've gone too far. If, you know, an hour later you're still walking like a duck, because everything is just so chafed, you've gone too far. If you get off the bike and within like 2 minutes you've completely forgotten how uncomfortable it was, that's fine. That's like a pretty reasonable level of discomfort. But if you're dealing with any kind of skin issues, even if it's just like a lot of redness, that's too far. And that's something that we can work on and we can fix. And I'm trying to think of another non-interval example. Basically, so in yoga, we always say you want to feel a little bit of discomfort is okay. Pain isn't okay. And the same is true in cycling. A little bit of discomfort, okay. You know what? No one ever said that sitting on this tiny little saddle with this nose where our nether regions are pressed right on it, no one ever said that was going to be comfortable all of the time. But it should never feel painful. If it feels painful, it's time to change something up. And we do that by experimenting and adjusting. So I don't know how many of you have had a bike fit in the past. Bike fits are kind of always my number one recommendation, is this idea of going to an expert, because it's not just raising or lowering your saddle. There's also moving your saddle forward and backward. Where your hands sit on the handlebars and how high up the handlebars are, that's going to affect what part of your pelvis is hitting the saddle. Honestly, even how short your cranks are is going to affect how you're pedaling on the bike, and therefore like what part of the saddle you're hitting. So there's all of these things that can get fixed with a bike fit. However, I think, and this is men and women, I think we tend to take a bike fitter's word as gospel. I know I've had a couple of crappy bike fits. I've had a bunch of fantastic bike fits in the past, but I've also had some pretty crappy ones that just weren't that great. So if you've gotten a bike fit and it's still uncomfortable, feel free to go back to the person and, ask them to try it again, because maybe it was just that they, you weren't really telling them about something that was really bothering you. Maybe it was really hard to be like, hey, my outer labia is chafing every single time I ride. Can we fix this? Maybe you didn't mention that your butt was numb halfway through the bike fit, because that felt really awkward. So go back, check in with them. They might suggest another saddle. They might tweak the fit a little bit. Or you can actually just try tweaking it yourself. Use some electrical tape, mark where your handlebars are, mark where your saddle is, mark where, the fore aft on the saddle is, and play with it. Move it a little bit forward, move it a little bit back. Be willing to experiment with your bike, with your body. And it might even be a combination thing, right? Like it could be that the combination of your bike fit plus the certain saddle that you're riding plus a different pair of bike shorts would actually work perfectly. But the bike shorts you have now just have a weird seam that keeps hitting the saddle. We're really trying to like biohack our bikes here. We're trying to figure out what the exact right combination is for us. And some of us are going to be lucky and we can be pretty loose with our combinations, but I know a lot of people that need, this exact brand of shorts and this style and this saddle, and it has to be at these exact measurements. And, the handlebars need to be set up exactly like this at this width, because if they're in like this, then suddenly I'm like twisting weird. So you can totally be a snowflake here and find like the exact thing that's going to work for you. So just be totally willing to play around with it. I think especially as women, a lot of us find bike mechanic stuff really kind of terrifying, right? The idea of, oh my gosh, I'm going to lower my own headset. Like that can be a little nerve wracking. Even changing your seat height, when a bike fitter told you that was your seat height, can feel a little like, whoa, I'm doing something a little crazy here. But it's totally fine. You can always go back. So just feel free to experiment and play with things on your bike. You also might, learn how to fix your bike a little bit in the process. So the other thing that happens in addition to pain and chafing is numb hands and feet and nether regions. Hands, feet, nether regions, all of this is probably going to be related to bike fit. Because, our hands are going to go numb because they tend to be like this as they're like gripping the handlebars. If they're a little too bent, you're going to cut some of your blood flow off to your hands. If you find that you are just constantly pressing down on your hands, almost in order to take some of the pressure off of your pelvis, I think this is a really common thing. You're pressing so hard into your hands, trying to give your butt a break. That can also lead to numb hands. If your feet are constantly going numb, the two things actually is your shoes. I'll talk about that in a second. The other is actually just that your saddle is a little too high, so you're kind of cutting off some of the circulation because you're just constantly sort of toppling yourself every time you pedal. But bike shoes are actually this thing that I don't talk about enough, and I really wanted to bring up tonight. I know someone had asked about feet issues, and if this is not the exact issue we're talking about, just drop it into the chat and we'll talk about it at the end of this. But the thing I've noticed with a lot of women is we tend to get the pair of bike shoes that gets recommended at the shop or recommended by a friend. And often with women's bike shoes, unfortunately, most bike stores don't carry a whole lot of options. They carry probably like one low end, one high end, very little in between, definitely not like a wide range of like different types. So the one thing I really encourage is, like, if you're feeling like your feet are numb and you feel like when you take off your shoes, you feel this like instant like, sigh of relief and you can suddenly feel your feet again, it's probably that your shoes are not the exact right shoe for you. This is really important with bike shoes because they're very stiff. So you're not really going to be able to break them in very well. It's unfortunate, but that tends to be the case. And a lot of bike shoes are very narrow. So if you happen to have wide feet or a wide toe box, a lot of women's shoes are not really going to work for that. That's my issue. And I had the worst feet for years. Every ride, my feet were freezing and numb and just so uncomfortable. And I finally realized that it was okay to try on a few different pairs of shoes and find the ones that actually felt like they fit me. So that's the same as everything else we just talked about, from head to toe. It's okay to, change the stuff that you're using. It's okay to not use the thing that the guy at the bike shop recommended. Like the 16-year-old that's like, I don't know, these are shoes. Like, he doesn't know. He doesn't have your feet. Let yourself actually, look around, try different shoes on, try different shorts on, try different jerseys on, just try different things. Okay, rant over. Numb nether regions. Again, probably a bit of a bike fit issue, and it's likely that your seat height is a little bit too high for you, and that every time you're pedaling, again, you're really pressing down. But the other thing it could be is that you're just kind of compressing a certain nerve or a certain vein in your nether regions as you're tilting. And that's not something that a bike fitter is going to be able to see unless he has like some really, really good pressure mapping stuff. He's probably not going to be able to notice that. So you might have to actually, change up your saddle, get a bit more support or a bit less support. If you've been using a cutout saddle, it might actually be that the cutout is trapping you a little bit there and you're going numb because of that. If you don't have a cutout saddle, it could be that you're really pressing down on a nerve and could use a cutout to give yourself a little bit of space. So it's probably one of those things. So again, experiment. And the best way to do all of this for free that I haven't mentioned yet is standing on the bike. We don't do this enough. We do this to climb a hill. We don't do this, or we do it to sprint at the end of a race. We don't do it just kind of casually riding, especially not when we're riding like long rides at an endurance pace. We tend to not stand up. And that's going to be our best defense against numbness, pain, chafing, saddle sores, everything. Because when we stand up, we get a bunch of blood flow back in, not just to our legs and our feet, but also to our nether regions. The other good thing that happens is when we sit back down, we actually make micro adjustments. We're generally sitting down in the same spot, but we're going to be moving by like a millimeter or two. So maybe that piece of skin that was getting chafed is not going to be getting chafed anymore. Maybe you're able to kind of unstick that spot. Maybe, the chamois cream was able to actually like shift into place and do its job. So if you're bad at this, like I am, set a rule that every 5 minutes you're going to stand up for a couple pedal strokes. Maybe make it, if you listen to music when you ride, once every song you stand up for a couple pedal strokes. And this is huge if you're an indoor rider. Very rarely do you stand up on the trainer, right? But just get up every few minutes. Just let yourself breathe. Let everything breathe. If you take one thing from this, take standing up. Post-ride. This is my absolute favorite slide because I love the idea of Donald ducking after a ride. I've been to a lot of stage races where the people after the race, despite the fact that it's a boiling hot day and it's a mucky mountain bike stage race, will sit around in their chamois for hours. I remember one guy coming to dinner in his chamois after a stage race, and we're talking like hours later. That guy didn't start the race the next day because the saddle sores were so bad. Coming back to that petri dish that I mentioned back during the underwear portion of our talk, I also had a guy do a scraping of a chamois for me and then just do like a time lapse of it. And let me tell you, it's its own ecosystem. It's disgusting. I should probably put a slide out, but it's just it's icky. You don't want to keep that next to your nether regions, especially, if it's been a long ride, if it's been a hot day, even the best saddle short chamois cream combination is probably still going to leave you with a bit of chafing. Maybe just shave the day before. I don't know. You want to get that off. You want to get clean and dry down there. If you're a mountain biker and you had to drive to a trailhead, throw on a maxi dress or a big skirt, get that chamois off, maybe even use a baby wipe, just get it off, get clean, get dry. That's the best thing you can do for your skin. It's like when you were a kid and your mom would yell at you for hanging out in your wet bathing suit and say you're going to get like a UTI. Same kind of thing applies here. Saddle sores, skin issues. Yeah. I won't spend a lot of time talking about this, but when we talk about saddle sores, if you're new to cycling, it kind of sounds like terrifying. They're really not. I mean, they can be, but they can really, there's a huge range. When you talk about saddle sores, you could be talking about basically like anything from like a pimple to frankly like a cyst that's like grape sized. I've known a few people that needed to get them operated on, and you could be talking about more of like an open sore. There's a pretty wide variety. Basically, any kind of painful skin issue in the nether region area that happens from riding a bike is a saddle sore. The best way to treat it is by not having them in the first place. That's why we talked about all this other stuff, all of the prevention. If you do have one though, please take a day off the bike. Trust me, your power numbers will not suffer from a day off the bike, but you might save yourself from needing to get it operated on at some point. Sounds kind of ridiculous, but one thing I learned in a lot of years of journalistic research is a lot of the time when you hear someone is out for a knee operation, that actually tends to just mean that they needed to get a saddle sore surgically removed. So if you hear that, pro tip, it's probably because of a saddle sore. You don't want to let them get bad. We're not getting paid to ride bikes. We ride bikes because it's fun. We should not have to push through a saddle sore to, get our workout for the weekend. Just take a day off, do some yoga, go for a walk, do literally anything else. You can also use a little bit of polysporin on it, but our big goal is actually keeping it clean and dry. So this is where, wearing that maxi dress again might be a really good idea. A couple of gynecologists told me, if you can sleep in the buff and in like a nice cool room, that's going to be really helpful. You just want to get a lot of air on that spot because frankly, we don't really air out our nether regions that much. So it's going to be really helpful to do that. And if it persists for more than 5 days, if you have a fever, if it like hurts and it's like hot to the touch, if you have any kind of indication that it might be infected, for the love of all that is holy, please go see a doctor because it could get a lot worse really fast. It sounds ridiculous, but it's just one of those things you don't want to mess with. Okay. Last really big topic here that I love talking about, laundry. When we wash our bike shorts, this is going to sound really odd, but just make sure when you put them in the washer, you put them in inside out. We really want to get that chamois clean. Like that's a really big thing that I find a lot of people don't do. And if you've ever had your laundry not go super well, like, didn't go through a great cycle and you like open up your chamois and you're like, this still has chamois cream on it. It's gross. I know a lot of people that still end up wearing them though. So we really want to make sure that part of the bike shorts gets washed. If you've been on like a really muddy ride, just spray them down with a hose first, get the mud off the front and then flip them inside out. The other thing, double rinse. I've been on a lot of rides in rainstorms. I don't know if anyone else has had this experience where I'm riding behind someone and you actually see foam start coming out of their chamois because all of the soap didn't come out of it. It's hilarious. You don't want it to be you. Double rinse because this also just makes sure that everything gets out. And when it comes to drying, a lot of people hang dry their shorts, and that's totally reasonable. I know they're expensive, and I know a lot of people aren't comfortable putting them in the dryer. Personally, I can say I've tried pretty much every single brand of bike shorts over my years of being a cycling journalist, and I've never not dried bike shorts in the dryer, and they've always been totally fine. I can't think of a single pair where I was like, well, this fell apart or this shrunk. So if you're not scared of it, try the dryer, because heat's gonna also help kill the bacteria and just ensure that your chamois actually gets dry. Because the worst thing you can do is hang out your shorts to dry and then put them away where they're still like 2% damp. Yeah, that's not going to be super helpful. And if you are drying them, sorry, I've like skipped a slide here. If you are drying them, please just make sure you put them somewhere where they're going to get some UV light. I know you're probably hearing a ton about UV light with coronavirus and how it kills the virus on surfaces. Same is true of a lot of bacteria. So if you can expose your shorts to some sunlight, that's going to be really key to helping make sure that they're actually clean when you put them back on. And sort of the last thing I like talking about in these talks is a quick word on honesty. You're not doing yourself any favors if when you go to get a bike fit, you don't mention that something is pinching you, on your labia, or, where your butt meets your thigh or something like that. You're not going to get a bike fit that really works for you. When you're at the shop, if you don't ask for the jersey that's a size up because that jersey that you're trying on just feels really snug and you're pretty sure that once you put a base layer under it, it's going to be way too tight, you're not doing yourself any favors. If you don't tell your coach that you have horrible PMS and it's going to be really hard to do your workout, or that, you're going through menopause and, you're having a really rough time and heat training is really difficult right now, you're not doing yourself any favors. And with your doctor, if you're not mentioning that you're cycling, 10 hours a week, that's not doing you any favors, because that's going to change, what they're telling you and what they're recommending. So please just, I know some of these topics are really awkward to talk about. I completely understand it. And, my husband is a professional cycling coach, and it wasn't until I started writing this book and doing these talks that he was like, oh, right, I should really be I should really be more like open to, when women are having their periods and, changing their training to accommodate that if they need it. And just being more available to have them comfortable talking about those issues. And the same, and now he's totally fine with it and is, more than happy to shift training to accommodate for that kind of stuff. But that doesn't happen if people aren't talking about it. So, kind of, I guess the reason I come out and do these nights and talk about all of this really awkward stuff, and frankly, as a really shy person who did not grow up public speaking, this is terrifying for me. But I'm coming out and I'm, talking about all this stuff because I think it's just so important to make our cycling the most comfortable that it can possibly be. So really encourage you to, be honest with all of those people in your life that can make your ride more comfortable. And then also, have these conversations with the other new female cyclists that, you connect with on the regular. They're probably very confused and very nervous and, are like the women who were at that bike race with me that are like, oh God, what's happening? What do I have here? Like, can you help me with this? So yeah, that's sort of my word on honesty here. Awesome. So I am going to open it up to questions now. Oh my goodness, that was a long talk. And I actually wanted to also just add before I delete this, and before I close out and stop sharing my screen, and I'll put this into the chat in a second here. I have a free ebook that kind of covers all of this stuff and a lot more. And my newsletter, and the link for it is just bit.ly/OCA women. So you can go sign up for that and get the ebook. And my website is consummateathlete.com. That's where I do all of my writing and podcasting and coaching. So yeah, that's all of that. I'm going to stop sharing now. I'm going to come into the chat here. And hang on, I'm just going to paste that link really quickly here to all participants. Okay, so that is that link. Okay, yeah, Chantal was seconding my bib shorts versus bike shorts. If you have any questions, just feel free to drop them in. And yeah, it looks like I'm really glad we had that little conversation about shoes, because I feel like that's a big issue. I think Yeah, Katrina, I think you're exactly right. It's probably just that her shoes are tighter and smaller. Probably the toe box issue. Shimano actually makes a really nice wider toe box without the shoes actually being super wide themselves. So I would really recommend them. Biking sandals. Yeah, that would actually be a tough one for me. I would say I'd maybe be okay with biking sandals if I was doing a very casual ride, but even from like a safety perspective, that just makes me cringe a little bit. And yeah, just from like your feet kind of moving around a lot, it would probably be a little weird. So I would use them if I was doing like a sub-hour like coffee shop ride kind of thing, but I probably wouldn't wear them on like a 3-hour mountain bike. Inner thigh rub. Yeah, huge issue. Definitely a huge issue. The first thing I would say is look at your saddle and not just the shape of it or the size of it. I would actually look like under the under the fabric wrapping. I would first see if it's soft there, because a lot of times some of the more aggressive saddles, or honestly some of the cheaper saddles, will have little stuff like kind of sticking out a little bit, or just like a more sharp line, and you kind of want to make that line a little less sharp so it's not hitting as harshly. You could even maybe use some kin tape over it, if that is the case.
I've actually had the thigh rubbing issue, and it's actually caused holes in my chamois.
Mm-hmm.
And it's caused, actually I have my bike, my phone right here. 1 second. My bike saddle here. So
I love it.
For me, what it was, hold on, we're looking here. It's a little dark, but it was caused kind of by this area here being just a little bit too sharp. It had like a bit of just a sharp bit there, and I actually got somebody with a grinder to just like grind it down. And I got 2 holes in 2 pairs of shorts, and I was like, we're done with this, and just ground it down because I must have moved my saddle someplace.
Yeah. So that would be kind of my number one thought, would just be like looking at that, for sure. The other thing though is, so this is more of like a kinesiologist kind of perspective, I guess, but as women, we tend to do a bit of a W sit most of the time. And by that, I mean, our knees tend to kind of bend inwards when we do pretty much anything. It's just this unfortunate thing that we all learn as little girls. I think it kind of comes back to this idea that all of us little girls need to keep our legs together and, always sit with them like, casually like this or whatever. And then we bring that into adult life. It's the reason that, you have a lot of young female basketball players get injured, because when they jump, instead of coming out with their knees wide, they come in with their knees in, and they end up with these weird like ACL tears and stuff like that. So I think even just a slight, if you're pedaling and your knees are even slightly coming in, just because that's how you've been standing and doing every other movement like that for your entire life, I think that could be kind of pushing your thighs in. So that could be part of it. So even just kind of using the cue of like thinking about keeping your knees not, flailing out, but just straight instead of gumming in, would be a good thing to try. And then the last thought I've had is, that the inner thigh thing can definitely happen to pretty much anyone. And unfortunately, another kind of like hack would be to throw some kin tape onto the area that's getting particularly chafed, especially for longer rides. It's not going to be the most pleasant solution, but it might help preserve the integrity of your skin a little bit. I've done that myself for really long, like bike packy type things where I knew like, I just need to get through this. Yeah. Various types of knee pain. Yes. Definitely an issue. Yeah, I don't know that we necessarily have enough time, or that I'm the physio to talk about that, on the grounds that I'm not a physio. But definitely, especially with mountain bike pedals, less so than road pedals, you get a lot of float in them a lot of the time. So it might just be that your leg is kind of flapping around a little more than you think it is. So either tightening the pedal so your cleat doesn't have as much float, so you're a little bit more in line, would be kind of my first line of defense for that. And of course the bike fit, because if your bike seat's a little too low, or it's, your knees are just doing a really weird thing, they're probably either coming out or coming in to make room, or just like compressing more than they should on the pedal stroke up. So yeah, there's about 1 million different things that could be going on there. Awesome. And so I think, unless anyone has any other questions, I think that's pretty good there. I actually can't believe I just talked for that long about nether regions. It's usually, in a bike shop situation, we all have wine and there's a little bit more like laughter and back and forth and stuff. So thank you so much for sitting around while I did this. And hopefully some of you had a glass of wine and indulging my weird, bad puns and jokes and stuff. I deeply appreciate it. And if anyone does have any questions, I'm super easy to find on the internet, pretty much everywhere. So please get in touch. No question is too awkward. I promise I'll do my best to answer, or at least point you in the right direction.
Yeah, once again, Chantel here from the OCA. I just want to say a final thank you to Molly for talking about this. You just have a way of talking about kind of a bit of a sensitive subject, but just adding humor to it, kind of making us all feel comfortable. What I love about this conversation is we do have people of all ages, ranging from like 12 or 13 years old to master women riders who've perhaps been riding for many years and maybe not known all of these facts. So very passionate about saddle fit and diminishing as much unnecessary pain as possible. If anybody here has any questions, obviously you have some connections to Molly. If you missed any of those messages or any way of finding her, feel free to just email events.team@ontariocycling.org. And obviously, please do feel free to join us for any of our future programming that we have, especially this week on Women's Cycling Week here. And I think that's about all for now. Molly, any final words?
I hope I covered pretty much anything anyone was going to ask. Basically just, my kind of initial message that riding should be comfortable. It should be fun. We all do this because we love it. So, anything we can do to make it more comfortable, make it more fun for ourselves and for other women, I'm just all for that.
Perfect. And we just had one final question that was actually for me. And yes, we're planning on posting these discussions on YouTube afterwards, as long as everybody who's been involved in the conversation is comfortable with having these posted, because we need to share this information. This isn't something that needs to be kept secret. So we really want to share this with others. So if you know of anybody that, oh man, she had this problem, I should probably forward this to her. It'll be on our YouTube page within the next couple of days. All right. Perfect. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. And I hope to see you at some of our future conversations we have, especially during this week. Keep an eye on our social media channels and our YouTube channel. Just search for Ontario Cycling Association on YouTube. Thank you, Molly, for coming. And thanks everybody for being here today.
Awesome. Thanks. Night, guys.